Hello, welcome to the Homeschool Mommy Mentor. I'm your host, Donna Goff, and I'm here to talk to you today about ORSH for the 21st century homeschooler. You might ask, what does ORSH mean? ORSH stands for One Room Schoolhouse. And then you'd ask, well, why would we want to do a one room schoolhouse? Let me give you some background. When we set up the graded system that we have today, the age grade association. We wanted children in school from the time they were first grade through 18. We wanted them off the streets while their parents were working in the factories. And we put in laws at that time to protect children from the predatory practices of the factories. And so we shifted to this age grade thing. It wasn't based on college studies that this was the best way children learned. We picked this up from the Prussian model that they had picked up after having, several wars there. They wanted to have a populace that would make good soldiers and good factory workers. Now, this was for the working class people. The people that were middle class and upper class, they had their private academies. In fact, most of the regular populace had access to and had basic education. Uh, those who wanted to go on to college had the skills to go on to college. They could read, they could write, and they could do math. Those who just wanted to run their business or work in a factory or whatever, they could read. A majority of the population could read. In fact, Massachusetts was the first state to start mandatory school attendance laws. And at the time, over 90% of the students were attending school. And that small 10% were probably children that were working. And so that's how we got what we have today. Now, what did we leave? We left a system of one room schoolhouses and a non graded system, even in the public schools that were in town. Children moved forward based on their performance, how well they learn the material, rather than by age. And today, some homeschool moms say, well, my kids actually third grade age, but they're doing fourth grade math, and they're uh, writing fifth grade or reading fifth grade level. What grade should I put them in? Because I need to put them in school. The fact of the matter is, in our system, they would go into the grade according to their age, unless they were at least about 3 years advanced across the board. And that's when we grade skip in the schools that actually grade skip. Or if they were 3 years below grade level, all the way across the board, that's when they would get federal monies to remediate them, and they might hold them back then. But the children that are in between that, between 3 years below grade level and 3 years above grade level, all go in the same classroom. And I just read federal reading statistics that the average child at the end of fourth grade, they found that 36% of the students were reading at or above grade level. That meant, well, no, 37%, not 36%. And that meant that 63% were not reading or functioning at grade level. And I thought, wow, that was an eye-opening statistic. Now, here is another statistic. We have had one-room schoolhouses in this country even up through the time that they initiated Common Core this decade. And they've done studies comparing children in non-graded schools where they move forward at their speed when they're ready. And they've compared them, and they call that a developmentally appropriate model or a continuous learning model. So they just move up as they're ready to move up. And it's not nobody's telling them, oh, I'm sorry, you've got the information and you understand it, but guess what? The rest of the class is doing this. So you're not allowed to work ahead. So you're just going to have to sit here and wait. Nobody's telling them that. In the non-graded school, they're just moving at their speed. Or in the graded school, maybe you're below developmentally. You might have a high IQ, but developmental issues are making it difficult for you to focus, impulse control, and things like that. And so you're not really learning in the classroom. You're not ready for the material they're giving you. And they say, oh, sorry about that. But guess what? This is what we're being taught, and you will learn it and move forward. And of course, if you aren't ready to learn it, you're not going to learn it, and you're going to move forward, and it creates holes. And so we've got these two systems. And in the studies that they did in comparing both of them, they found that standardized academic achievement tests were used in 57 of the studies. And of those studies, 52 or 91% indicated that on all comparisons, the non-graded groups performed better 58% of the time, or as well as 33% of the time, the graded groups on measures of academic achievement. And I thought, wow. And that was a study that was published in The Benefits of Non-Graded Schools by Barbara Nelson Pavin. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, what's going on here? What was the one-room schoolhouse? Well, in the elite academies, with tutors, in the private schools, in the dame houses, and the cottage schools and the one-room schoolhouses, they didn't divide children by grade. Okay, they were able to teach general knowledge. They were able to teach general knowledge to all the children at the same time, because general knowledge isn't based on child's developmental abilities unless they're really, really brain delayed. Okay. But the average child that's, a few years below grade level to a few years above grade level, they could all learn the same things at the same time. A younger sibling can be in the room and hear the lesson about China and be able to tell you all kinds of things about China. And so they put all the children together in the same room to learn general knowledge. And then they divided the children when it came to learning skill like things, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And so the beginner group, their main focus in the beginner group in the one-room schoolhouse was learning to read well and to learn penmanship, not just writing, not just doing something that's a semblance of a P or a B or a C, but they worked on really getting it down, looking really nice and fluid, so that they could take notes and they could write compositions quickly and things like that. And reading, they had to read. They were in that beginner group until they could read the Bible. And usually they only went through about book 3 in the one-room schoolhouses, book 3 of the McGuffey's Readers. They were just teaching them how to read. And then they did their reading in the books that were in the classroom and in the Bible. The advanced class usually was the last 2 years the child was in the school, and the school was about 8 years long, and they'd start about 8 years old. So they went 8 to 16. And the last 2 years in school, the 7th year, they would get all the math that we're taught in elementary school. They're taught in 1 year. And the next year, they can take Euclidean geometry, which is algebraic geometry, or they could take surveying. And then they also learn composition in their 7th year. Prior to that, they were copying, they were working on their penmanship, they were reading, and they were learning all the same general knowledge as the older kids were. They were all learning it together. And then that seventh and eighth year, the seventh year, of course, was the composition work and the math. And then the eighth year was refining of that. And they could take the final at the end of the seventh year. And if they passed it, great. But if they didn't, they had an opportunity to take it again at the end of eighth grade year. And that test, they didn't give them multiple choice. They had fill in the blank or essays. They had to be able to answer the question. They needed to know the material. So the four things that I took away from studying the one-room schoolhouse was that they had context in their lives. The children lived math at home. They worked in the fields with their dads. They worked with their moms in the house, in the kitchen. They went to the market with them when they had to sell their goods or procure things that they needed back at the farm. They counted eggs. They knew what a bushel was. They had helped plant a field, so they knew how much an acre was. So they lived math and they understood math because life was very quantitative for them in their vocabulary. They came from homes where they were immersed in scripture. They read the Bible regularly in the home. And so it was part of their literacy picture that they needed to be able to read the Bible. They began adulting very young because they worked with their parents in the fields and in the home. And so they learned how to work. So that first thing is they had context, living math, the Bible, and the adulting young. The second thing is that general knowledge was the bulk of the day and was done together, because general knowledge is not based on skill. It's not based on age, and it's not based on development. And the third thing I got from one-room schoolhouses were that skills were taught by mastery approach, grouped by ability in larger groups, not by age. Beginner focus was reading and penmanship to reading proficiency, and proficiency was reading the Bible. Advanced students focused on math, composition, elocution, being able to speak, public speaking, literature, and polish. And children got to read and study by their own interest. And one more thing they had. So they had context, general knowledge together, skills by ability, and the last thing they also had recess. They played hard, and they did nature studies outside. And so those were the things that I took away from the one-room schoolhouse. And I thought, really, that would benefit me in the home because I had children that were spread out in age. And I thought, there is no way I'm going to teach all of eighth grade to one child and all of sixth grade to another child and all of second grade to another child. Those are all arbitrary divisions. We've taken knowledge and we've chopped it up and we drip feed it out because we want children off the street during the time their parents are working until they're 18. And so knowledge had to be taught in a strange way. So all the way through first through sixth grade, you learn certain things and we relearn them in seventh and eighth grade, more condensed. And I learned that that children are more concrete in their thinking. So a lot of children are not ready for the more abstract knowledge. And so what ends up happening is when we hit puberty, our brain goes through a change and we take a cognitive leap and we're more able to understand abstract learning better. And that's why they usually taught algebra in eighth or ninth grade, because the children were further along development wise and ready for more abstract thought. If you get the abstract thought and focus before you're ready for it, you feel stupid because you don't get it. And I found that with the math, because they're trying to teach below the middle of the class, as this broad development range, they had to teach below the middle of class so majority could pass the material, but they would reteach 80% each year so that they could catch those who weren't ready last year and also refresh the mind of those who were barely ready, so that they could recall it. So it's really possible to go through school getting B's, which is above average, and think you're doing pretty good at math. And really, it's because you're getting this repetition, and it's not because you're that advanced per se. And then all of a sudden you hit algebra and you think, well, I should be able to handle it. But you don't have the other material mastered and you're not ready for it. And I really like the developmentally appropriate continuous learning model. We just mark in the book where we were the last time. And when we come back to the lesson, we review what we covered. And if they don't know it, then we cover it again. And if they do know it, we move on. And it surprised me that in some things it may appear to be going slow, really, at first. But as they get it, all of a sudden their learning curve is beyond their peers. And so I really like this one room schoolhouse approach. And I incorporated it into a curriculum for my children I created called The Power of an Hour, the Gateway to a Classical Education. And I put this together and taught my children together. And I will be doing another video and it will talk about the power of an hour because we covered art, music, and spelling and geography. And there's a lot of basic math that you can cover in a general education approach where they learn hands-on, and you can cover all the basic math operations they need before going into pre-algebra in a 4-year period in as little as 20 minutes a day, and getting a new math concept every other week. And so I put this together, and I'll do another video and we'll go into that a little bit more in depth. But before we do that, I have another video that I need to do. Now that I've talked about the one room schoolhouse, the next video that I'm going to do is called The Edge. And it talks about what to do with children that are not yet school age. I want to thank you for your time today. If you like what you're hearing, just click the subscribe button below, share it with your friends, ring the bell so that there's a little bell underneath the picture or the video, and that means you'll get notifications. Otherwise, you'll have to go to YouTube and look in your subscriptions to see if there are any other videos. Join my newsletter. In my newsletter, I send out every week. I let people know what the videos were that I did that week, whatever blog posts I did, and I always usually have a homeschool tip. Thank you for your time. See you next time. Enjoy the journey.